This is Purple Cow Milk. I'm a musician. I'm talking about purple cow milk today. You make it by combining different ingredients in a blender. You can Google the recipe. When I was 6 or 7, my cousin had heard about purple cow milk, but we didn't have Google. So we experimented. We pulled out some purple grape juice, pulled out some milk, stirred in a little maple syrup. The milk curdled. The whole thing was incredibly disgusting, and it was a disaster. It went down the drain. But I've been thinking about this idea lately of combining unlike things. As you heard, I'm a musician. My work is with Community Music Works. It's an organization I started and continue to work with in the West End of Providence. We're right on the main drag on Westminster Street in the West End. And if you're coming down Westminster Street, you'll pass a liquor store, you'll pass a fruit seller selling fruits and vegetables out of a truck, a gas station, a diner, a group of string musicians, Guatemalan restaurant, and down you go. And we delight in that unexpected location, right? We delight in being not what you'd expect as you walk down the street. Because what we do is music. And music is spark, music is spirit, music is joy, it's connection. It runs deep in all of us. Music moves us. We are moved by music. We move to music. I have a couple of young children, and one of the incredible things to watch is how a young child moves almost automatically, especially before the age of 3 or 4, as soon as you put on music. Because it just moves right into us. It's so much part of our lives. So the idea of taking music and our musical practice into spaces that people don't necessarily associate with classically trained string players is about infusing the everyday life experience of people in a city with, hopefully, unexpected moments of joy, of spark, of human connection. We work with about 150 young people who come study string instruments for free, participate in ensembles, work together deeply, and explore what it means to be young musicians in their community, or what kinds of impacts they can make. In the 50s, the legendary community activist and community organizer Jane Jacobs fought against the building of the Cross-Manhattan Expressway. As you may know, the powers that be were planning a 4-lane highway through Greenwich Village, through Washington Square Park, and it was the age of cars. And Jane Jacobs and other neighbors stood up and said, no way, no how, we're not doing that to my neighborhood, but also we're not doing that to the city, because great neighborhoods make great cities. And what makes great neighborhoods is diversity of people, diversity of uses, what she called mixed primary uses, parks, stoops. And she liked how people would encounter things, unexpected things in neighborhoods. She fought another development in New York, although unsuccessfully, and that was the building of Lincoln Center, the august Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts. And there were a lot of things to oppose about the building of Lincoln Center at that moment. But one that she particularly fought against was moving the energy of all of those arts institutions into one plaza and sort of depriving all of the neighborhoods of the vitality that the orchestra and the opera and the theater and the ballet and all these organizations brought to a neighborhood, where they might be next to a deli, next to a bookstore, next to an apartment building, next to a school, and how people would encounter each other unexpectedly in neighborhoods. About 20 years before Jane Jacobs was active, John Dewey, the philosopher and educator, was thinking a lot about the connection of art and the everyday. And he was troubled by how far away art is presented from what we think of as human experience. This is a quote, and he says, his project is to restore continuity between the refined and intensified forms of experience that are works of art and the everyday events, doings, and sufferings that constitute experience. So, in other words, how do you restore continuity between where art really came from, which is human suffering, human joy, and works of art? At Community Music Works, we're always delighted when there's moments of restoring that continuity. Sometimes it's through combining unlike things. Sometimes it's that children spontaneously start dancing to a concert we're playing in the park. But the John Dewey quote I realized recently speaks to something that's a deep question for me, one that I've lived with for a long time. I grew up in a house filled with music, and not because my parents were musicians, but because they had the stereo on full volume a lot of the time, mostly playing classical music. And for them, music was a chance to go inward, it was a chance to connect with heart, it was a chance to think about spiritual quest, it was a chance to think about something deeply human and find things that were universally true. When I went into music, I think very much influenced by this attitude, I didn't necessarily encounter that as the predominant reason that people play and go see music, especially concert music. And the tuxedos and the formality really serve in some ways to distance people from the joy, from the spark, the possibilities in music. So we've made a practice, sometimes playing in concert halls, but often playing in other spaces, like the Taqueria down the street in Olneyville Square. When we had Emmanuel Axe in town a few years ago, a world-famous pianist who plays in all the great concert halls around the world, we invited him to come play a concert at La Lupita Taqueria. And again, it's that opportunity to find something unexpected. But it's the opportunity to walk into a taqueria one day and find a world-class pianist, and not where you'd expect that person, not the kind of attitude you expect to bring into a concert, but just, oh, this is what I'm dealing with right now, and aha, what might happen here? A lot of this is about disruption. When you have a stream flowing, and there's a rock in the middle of that stream, something happens, right? The water is diverted around the rock. And if you've ever taken a boat, a kayak, a canoe, a raft down a river, you know that the water just behind that rock actually starts flowing in the other direction. It's called an eddy. If you are just paddling gently and stay in the current, your boat will continue to go with the flow. If you point the front of your boat into that eddy, it can actually turn the boat around. It's that powerful. Maxine Greene was another inspiration to Community Music Works, another philosopher of education and arts, taught at Teachers College in New York for most of her career, and an inspiration to so many artists and educators. She said, and this is a quote, she said, "I argue for aware engagements with the arts for everyone, so that individuals in our democracy will be less likely to confine themselves to the main text, or I would say the mainstream, less likely to coincide forever with what they already are." She was saying, art experiences can actually be that rock in the river. They can divert us from the way we think about things, and in fact, the way we think about ourselves. What things cause us to think differently about ourselves? At CMW, I know that art experiences, musical moments, like the ones you've seen, have changed some things for me. And I think that's been true for my colleagues, for our students, for neighbors, for audience members, for the families of the children who work with us. I think we encounter music and it does shift some things. And I think in a broader sense, the eddy current of Community Music Works is that in that space, in that unexpected space created around music, there's a strong community that forms, strong bonds between people, between teachers and their students, between musicians and families, between neighbors and audience members and musical events. And those strong bonds are not insignificant if you take a step back. I think about discussions we're having in our society right now about isolation, about social isolation. Ironically, in a time of so much connection, the internet, social media, we're connected in so many ways, and yet so many people report a sense of isolation. Politically, ideologically, there's such divides. We struggle to think, how would we talk to a neighbor who voted for a different candidate? So to be involved in a community where people really see one another, where they see one another and make deep connections across difference, be that difference of background, of class, of race, of neighborhood, to have a community where you are seen for who you are, for your full humanity, that's a powerful thing. So I would just close with this. Disruption in and of itself is not a good. We've certainly seen so many disruptive things throughout history and in our politics that distort the status quo. But disruption guided by a sense of wanting to challenge the mainstream, wanting to challenge the way things are, wanting to keep in our minds and hearts something about a human connection, a deeper bond, a deeper sense of spirit between us, is something critical. And I would just say, we need to actually take those steps and put the rock in the middle of the river. Sometimes that takes a leap of faith. Sometimes it takes not knowing what's going to happen when you combine different things. But the thing we have to keep in mind is the unanticipated outcome of such an action is what happens in the eddy, what happens in those spaces that are created that didn't exist before. Thank you so much.